67. Little King Peepee. Valapee, or the Isle of Yams, being within plain sight of Media's dominions, we were not very long in drawing nigh to its shores. 2 long parallel elevations, rising some 3 arrow flights into the air, double-ridge the island's entire length, lapping between a widening vale so level withal that at either extremity the green of its groves blends with the green of the lagoon, and the isle seems divided by a strait. Within several paces of the beach our canoes keeled the bottom, and camel-like mutely hinted that we voyagers must dismount. Hereupon the assembled islanders ran into the water, and with bent shoulders obsequiously desired the honour of transporting us to land. The beach gained, all present wearing robes instantly stripped them to the waist, a naked chest being their salute to kings. Very convenient for the common people, this, their half-clad forms presenting a perpetual and profound salutation. Presently Peepee, the ruler of Valapee, drew near, a boy hardly 10 years old, striding the neck of a burly mute, bearing a long spear erect before him, to which was attached a canopy of 5 broad banana leaves new plucked. Thus shaded, little Peepee advanced, steadying himself by the forelock of his bearer. Besides his bright red robe, the young prince wore nothing but the symbol of Valapean royalty, a string of small, close-fitting concave shells, coiled and ambushed in his profuse curly hair, one end falling over his ear, revealing a serpent's head curiously carved from a nutmeg. Quite proverbial, the unembarrassed air of young slips of royalty. But there was something so surprisingly precocious in this young Peepee that at first one hardly knew what to conclude. The first compliments over, the company were invited inland to a shady retreat. As we pursued the path, walking between old Mohi, the keeper of chronicles, and Samoa, the Upoluan, Babbalanja besought the former to enlighten a stranger concerning the history of this curious Peepee. Whereupon the chronicler gave us the following account, for all of which he alone is responsible. Peepee, it seems, had been proclaimed king before he was born, his sire dying some few weeks previous to that event, and vacating his divan, declared that he left a monarch behind. Marvels were told of Peepee. Along with the royal dignity, and superadded to the soul possessed in his own proper person, the infant monarch was supposed to have inherited the valiant spirits of some 20 heroes, sages, simpletons, and demigods previously lodged in his sire. Most opulent in spiritual gifts was this lord of Valapee, the legatee, moreover, of numerous anonymous souls bequeathed to him by their late loyal proprietors. By a slavish act of his convocation of chiefs, he also possessed the reversion of all in singular the immortal spirits, whose first grantees might die intestate in Valapee. Servile yet audacious senators, thus prospectively to administrate away the inalienable rights of posterity. But while yet unborn, the people of Valapee had been deprived of more than they now sought to wrest from their descendants. And former Peepees, infant and adult, had received homage more profound than Peepee the present. Witness the demeanor of the chieftains of old upon every new investiture of the royal serpent. In a fever of loyalty, they were wont to present themselves before the heir to the isle, to go through with the court ceremony of the pupera, a curious proceeding so called, inverted endeavors to assume an erect posture, the nasal organ, the base. It was to the frequent practice of this ceremony that most intelligent observers imputed the flattened noses of the elderly chiefs of the island, who, nevertheless, much gloried therein. It was these chiefs also who still observed the old-fashioned custom of retiring from the presence of royalty with their heads between their thighs, so that while advancing in the contrary direction, their faces might be still deferentially turned toward their lord and master. A fine view of him did they obtain. All objects look well through an arch. But to return to Peepee, the inheritor of souls and subjects. It was an article of faith with the people of Valapi that Pepe not only actually possessed the souls bequeathed to him, but that his own was enriched by their peculiar qualities. The headlong valor of the late Tongatona, the pusillanimous discretion of Blandou, the cunning of Voyou, the simplicity of Raymonda, the prodigality of Zonnerie, the thrift of Titoni. But had all these and similar opposite qualities simultaneously acted as motives upon Pepe, certes, he would have been a most pitiable mortal in a ceaseless eddy of resolves, incapable of a solitary act. But blessed be the gods, it was otherwise, though it fared little better for his subjects as it was. His assorted souls were uppermost and active in him one by one. Today valiant Tongatona ruled the isle, mediating wars and invasions. Tomorrow, thrice discreet Blandou, who, disbanding the levies, turned his attention to the terraces of yams, and so on in rotation to the end. Whence, though capable of action, Pepe, by reason of these revolving souls in him, was one of the most unreliable of beings. What the open-handed Zonnerie promised freely today, parsimonious Titonti withheld tomorrow, and forever Raymonda was annulling the doings of Voyou, and Voyou the doings of Raymonda. What marvel, then, that in Valapi all was legislative uproar and confusion, advance and retreat, abrogations and revivals, foundations without superstructures, nothing permanent but the island itself. Nor were there those in the neighboring countries who failed to reap profit from this everlasting transition state of the affairs of the kingdom. All boons from Pepe were entreated when the prodigal Zonnerie was lord of the ascendant, and audacious claims were urged upon the state when the pusillanimous Blandou shrank from the thought of resisting them. Thus subject to contrary impulses, over which he had not the faintest control, Pepe was plainly denuded of all moral obligation to virtue. He was no more a free agent than the heart which beat in his bosom. Wherefore, his complacent parliament had passed a law, recognizing that curious but alarming fact, solemnly proclaiming that King Pepe was minus a conscience, agreeable to truth. But when they went further and vowed by statute that Pepe could do no wrong, they assuredly did violence to the truth, besides making a sad blunder in their logic. For far from possessing an absolute aversion to evil, by his very nature, it was the hardest thing in the world for Pepe to do right. Taking all these things into consideration, then, no wonder that this wholly irresponsible young prince should be a lad of considerable assurance and the easiest manners imaginable. End of chapter 67.